Welcome to Lindamood-Bell Radio. I'm Dave Hungerford for Lindamood-Bell. Are you concerned about your child's literacy skills or academic performance? Lindamood-Bell instruction in reading, comprehension, and math helps students of all ages catch up or get ahead. In just weeks, students make extraordinary progress, making them more confident and prepared for school. Our evidence-based instruction is available both online and in person. Learn more and get started today at lindamoodbell.com or call us at 800-233-1819. Today's episode is a conversation I had with the reigning Miss Massachusetts, Kiersten Khoury. Here it is. Well, Kiersten Khoury, thank you very much for joining me. Congratulations on winning the Miss Massachusetts pageant.
Thank you.
Tell me, what all is involved in a pageant?
Absolutely. So there is 5 areas of competition. And so we start off with the private interview, which is not on stage. It's just with the judges, and they do a 10-minute panel interview where they can pretty much ask you anything they want. And then following that area of competition, we move to the on-stage portion. And there is gown, which everybody usually knows pageants by, beautiful dresses, walking on stage. And then there's talent. For the Miss America competition. There is fitness, which has taken over for swimsuit. And then there's the onstage question.
So that initial interview, what are they looking for?
I want to believe that they're looking for a young woman to be herself. I think that sometimes people put on a persona or think that they should answer a question in a certain way, and it often takes away from who they really are. The entire purpose behind the private interview is for the judges to get to know you on a one-on-one basis and get to see you not in a big stage auditorium setting, to see what you're like on a day-to-day basis. So I think that the real girl that you are is what really needs to shine through during an interview.
And so you've won Miss Massachusetts. What were the levels you had to go through to get to that stage?
So there's actually local competitions prior to the Miss Massachusetts competition. So I competed with 25 women, and all of those women held local titles. So there are multiple locals throughout everybody's state. This is not just for Massachusetts. Every state has local competitions that lead up to the state title. And then once you win the state title, you go on to Miss America, the national title.
So how many were there like?
So I competed in 2 local pageants prior to the Miss Massachusetts competition. So I did not win the first one that I competed in, but I won the second one, and that was my ticket to Miss Massachusetts.
And then up next is
Miss America.
Miss America.
Yes.
Miss America tournament.
Crazy.
And what do you have to do to prepare for that?
There's a lot of preparation. I think that I've been doing this for a really long time, 19 years. So a lot of that preparation has come from my years and my experience. But in terms of creating a, talent and making sure that you're happy with the piece that you've put together, preparing for the fitness competition. So eating right and being in the gym, making sure that you're healthy, mind, body, and soul all together. That's really what they're looking for there. The wardrobe is a big piece of that. So, going and finding your gown and your other outfits, that's a big piece of that. You want to make sure that your wardrobe always represents you to your fullest. So that's another area that we focus on. And then my personal favorite of preparation is the interview preparation. So I actually watch the news every morning to make sure that I'm up on my current events. But I also work with people who will help me practice an interview. And I always get asked, what are you practicing? You don't know what the questions are. And it's very true. But you can practice the way that your mind really handles those questions that you don't know the answer to, and what you're going to pull from, and what examples you're going to talk about that have happened throughout your life. So I always find that really interesting.
Do they try and throw a few zingers in there to set you off?
Absolutely. Practice and in the real thing, there's always a zinger or two that you just would have never imagined they would ask you.
So you said you've been doing this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start?
So I started at 4 years old, was my real first pageant. And so we got a postcard in the mail, and, my mom was going to throw it out. She had no interest in me doing a pageant, and I had seen it. And because I was a dancer, I loved being on stage. So I started dancing at 2 years old, stayed dancing through my entire high school career, competitively. And I just absolutely loved it. So I saw the girl on stage on the postcard with the big crown and banner and the trophy. And I was like, Mom, I want to do that. She was like, no, you don't. You don't even know what that is. I'm like, well, what is it? And she's like, it's a pageant. And so I was like, I want to do that. And after some convincing, she finally said yes. Everyone always thinks my mother forced me into this. It's so not true. It was really me. I wanted to do it. And we went to my first pageant, and I had no idea what I was doing. We say that I showed up with a dress and a dream, and I did. And after the whole thing was over, I was second runner-up out of like 80 girls. So I actually did really well. And then went back the next year and had everything perfect, was ready to go. Second runner-up again. But that third year, I won. And that was the first ever pageant title I had held. And I was the 2008 National American Miss Massachusetts Princess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you forced your mother into it.
I really did. I forced my family into it. And, they've all rallied behind me since then. And even my father, a lot of people probably think like, oh, dad might not love that for their daughter. My father is in full support of my pageant journey and always has been.
So this must take up a lot of your time as a kid, certainly. If you did this, did you do this all through elementary? And
I did. I have competed consistently for the last 19 years.
Wow. And so what was your school academic journey like?
So I was a public school kid. I went to public elementary, public middle, and public high school. And pageants were always an extracurricular for me. We never let that deviate from my education in any way. It gets more difficult when you're in college and you have to start, managing. I went to college in North Carolina. I went to High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. So travel-wise, that became a little more difficult. But growing up, school was always first.
And we're talking because of some issues you faced early in your academic career. Let's talk about your reading history and journey a little bit. How did that start out, kindergarten, first, second grade for you?
Yeah, so, and from what I've been told and what I can remember as a child, I had always struggled to read. I was always a little bit behind everybody else in my class, but it wasn't until fifth grade that I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia. And it took quite a few people, quite a few bits of testing for them to actually figure out what it was. I had been diagnosed with reading comprehension disorder, a tracking disorder, and a few other things. But nobody wanted to talk about the word dyslexia. Everybody kind of danced around it.
Why do you think that is?
I think in part, typically schools don't diagnose dyslexia, public schools specifically, because it's usually a medical diagnosis. Usually some sort of doctor is going to give that diagnosis. So I think that was part of it. I also think that they maybe thought it was a little bit severe of a word to use, and if they could use something else, they may have. So I think reading comprehension and tracking disorder were two nice ways of putting that I struggled to read. And everybody just seemed to dance around the word dyslexia until one woman finally said that I was actually dyslexic. That's when we came here for that testing to make sure of that.
And so did you, typically first and second, and now kindergarten, in third grade, they talk about, instead of learning to read, you're reading to learn. It's kind of a shift. That's kind of a cliche that's used in education. Those early years, do you recall struggling and feeling yourself that it was?
Yes. And I struggled in most subjects because what I think a lot of people don't think about when you have dyslexia is that it affects everything. It doesn't just affect your English class. It affects every class that you take, because you're reading instructions and you're reading a textbook and you're spelling and you're reading out loud a passage. So there's every area of school I struggled in because of this. So I just had that overwhelming feeling of I'm bad in school. I'm not good at school. School's not for me. And I had two parents who were highly educated. They're both doctors. And so I always looked up to them and how well they've done in school. And I couldn't understand why I struggled so badly. I came from well-educated parents. I went to a great school. Westwood Public Schools are very well known for their great education. So I just couldn't, even as a child, wrap my head around why I struggled so badly. And I just kind of thought I was, I hate to use the word, but stupid. And so it wasn't until I was diagnosed with dyslexia and I actually did my testing at Lindamood-Bell. My mom had come home days later to show me the paperwork and show me what the testing had said. And I had a 10th grade vocabulary, and my ability to understand my reading comprehension when somebody else read to me, I believe, was of an 8th grader. I was in 5th grade at the time when this was done, but my reading comprehension myself was in 2nd. I was second grade reading comprehension.
Because you can the words off the page, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was just struggling to read and comprehend what I was reading. But if somebody else read it to me, I could listen and follow. And in terms of being able to speak, I never had a problem in that department.
Your struggles didn't affect your confidence, or did they?
They definitely did. I think school was a tough place for me. I loved to be there. I loved school, but I really struggled. And anything that's difficult becomes not fun after a while. And I hated to read. I absolutely hated it. I avoided it at all costs. It was a difficult thing for me to do, and I didn't want to do it. And a lot of people don't like to do things that are difficult for them.
Seems like your avocation, you're in pageantry, that you really have to come across and be very confident, and not even come across, you have to be confident.
Absolutely.
It's deep-seated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think pageants were a great outlet for me because it was something I thrived in. Maybe because there was no reading component, it was all memorization. So I used to give, a lot of pageants still do this, but they do 30-second introductions where you talk a little bit about yourself, something you memorize and perform on stage. And I was always really good at that because there was no reading involved. My mom would tell me what to say, and I would memorize it, and I would recite it on stage. And so pageants were a place that I thrived because I was good at them. And so I finally had that outlet of something that wasn't affected by reading for me when I was young.
And so you came here, did you say fifth grade?
I did, fifth grade, yes.
And so what was you went through the testing. That's a pretty grueling, can be a grueling process.
It was long, yes.
Very long. And do you recall the instruction, what that was like?
What I can remember is that I went through the testing and I came home, and I think a day or two later, my mother had gotten the results of the testing, and she sat me down and told me. And the one thing I said to her, I started crying, and I said, "So, Mommy, I'm actually smart?" And she said, "Yes, you're very smart." She said, "You just struggled to read. And this school can help you, and they can make it easier for you. And if you want to go, we're going to help you get there." And I remember it was a big financial decision for my parents. It was a big decision for me. I was giving up my entire summer because I did the summer intensive. So it was 8 weeks of my summer. I was going to be in school all day. And it was a really big decision to make in a fifth grader, I definitely had to think about it, but I did. I said to my mom, I said, "Can I have a day to think about it?" And she said yes. And so I went upstairs, I went to bed, I came down in the morning and I said, "I'm going to do it." And she was like, "Are you sure?" She's like, "You can't, cry every single day that you have to go to school and all your friends are at the beach." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm going to do it." And I was determined at that point. And that's one thing about me. Don't tell me I can't do something because I'll prove you wrong twice over. So I was determined to learn to read. And I came here and I actually finished the program, I think, in 5 or 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 8 weeks. So I actually finished quicker. I was flying through the material. So it really resonated with me.
Right. And there had to be challenges along the way too, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think at first I was a little nervous that I didn't, I was going to be put on the spot and forced to do something I wasn't good at. That was definitely a scary feeling. The feeling of, just maybe not doing as well, because I do remember they never really told you where you were at throughout the process. They just wanted you to keep learning. They weren't going to say, "Oh, you're here now," or "You're reading at a 7th grade level now." You didn't know. You just kept pushing, you kept learning, and you kept growing. And so I didn't really know how much progress I had made until after the fact. So what an amazing feeling to learn that I was then reading at a 10th grade level going into 6th grade. So I had thrived with the program, and it was such a wonderful relief to know that my hard work had paid off and that the techniques that I was given were going to further my educational career more than I could have ever known at the time.
And when you got back to school that fall, what was that like?
So it was amazing. We had all of the Learning Center department had looked over my testing and seen where I was at. And I did stay on an IEP through middle school, excuse me. I think it was important that I had that extra help through middle school, but I was able to remove myself from an IEP by high school. And I was able to make that decision, which I was fortunate about. I felt like I no longer needed the assistance and I could make that decision. But I do remember the middle school Learning Center department was so impressed by my skills and the progression I had made and how well I was doing that they actually sent some of their teachers to learn Lindamood-Bell practices to be able to help other students and continue their education through the public school system.
While you were going through instruction, you went through primarily, I think, Seeing Stars, which is our decoding program. Were there some sort of things that you did that were kind of out of the norm from your typical academic experience?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I remember the most about Lindamood-Bell, and granted, I was young, but I had an instructor who allowed me to write on her car with an expo marker. She had a white car, and we would practice, spelling words and breaking down words and decoding them and rebuilding them. And we would do this on her car with an expo marker. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the entire world. I would go home every single day and tell my mom that I got to write on this woman's car with an expo marker, which she probably in turn said, don't try that with mine because not happening. But it was such a great way of, number one, getting me outside because I was in school all day and it was summer. So it was nice to spend a little bit of time outside. But it was also such a fun way of making something that would typically be a little bit tedious really entertaining, especially for a kid. So that was one of my favorite memories.
I've never seen that in the manual, but I really like that story.
It was awesome. I recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. So did your grades were affected? You got off the IEP in middle school or high school rather. Your grades improved? Were they?
Absolutely. So at least in our elementary school, we didn't have typical grades. We had a C, an S, and a U. I think it was like consistently, sometimes unusually, or something like that. That was like the score. So it was really like a 1 out of 4 situation. So, elementary school, it's a little bit different. But in middle school, you have real grades, and those grades can impact you. They depend what level you're going to be in high school. And in my high school, we had AP, we had honors, and then we had regular classes. And, I was a pretty determined kid. I always wanted to do really well. I knew I wanted to go to college and do well in college. So from middle school, I really took my academics very seriously, and I did see an improvement. I was never a straight A student. Math was always hard for me. It will still be hard for me. I'm not a math brain, but I was definitely an A and B student. And I don't think I ever got a C. I really I prided myself on doing well in school. When I got to high school, I was an honors student. So I was in all honors. I took a few AP classes, except for math. I was in regular math class. But
I have a program for that.
Do you? Maybe I should come back and revisit and work on my math skills because they need help. But I was able to do very well. And, I left high school with a great GPA. I got into my dream college and, I don't think any of that would have been possible had I not been here.
And in your workaday life, do you read a lot?
So actually, this is crazy. I read for pleasure now. I never thought I would be somebody who enjoyed reading, ever. Even though I was capable of doing it, it was never fun for me. And now it is. So I actually, this is such a small thing, but for me, it was a monumental moment. I went to my first ever movie a few weeks ago that I had read the book prior. And I always remember growing up, my mother's a huge reader. And so I always remember her saying, oh, I read the book. I'm excited to see this movie. And I could never say that. And it was a moment for me where I was like, wow, I actually read a book and now I can go and see the movie. And I did it on my own time for fun. So that was like a huge moment for me, realizing that I enjoy reading now.
We work a lot to develop imagery as you read, both to help with the decoding part that you work on, is also comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times our students say that they read the book first, they go see a movie, and it's a little confusing because the pictures don't match. Did that happen for you, or did it?
It used to. It definitely used to. I struggled to picture things in my head. I even still to this day struggle to picture my right and my left in my head. I am the typical.
Probably used to stage right and stage left.
Yeah, I do this a lot. I do the little scribble because I know I write with my right hand. So I do struggle to picture in my head. But I will say with time and with practice, that's gotten better for me. I'm able to pick up on things that the writer had put on paper and make an image in my head a lot better than I used to be able to. My mom used to not understand why I didn't like to read. And I said, because I don't get it. There's nothing going on up here. I can't see a movie play out in my head. I just can't do it. But with time, it's gotten better. And now I actually can make a semblance of a picture. And it's great because that's what's enjoyable about reading for normal people. But as somebody who is dyslexic, I never understood that until now.
And speaking of dyslexia, you have committed to doing some community service work regarding that. Your upcoming ramp up to the Miss America pageant. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So every young woman who competes in Miss Massachusetts or Miss America has a community service initiative. And so we all get to choose something that's near and dear to our hearts. And so while we do a lot of service throughout the year for the American Heart Association and other organizations, local, national, we have one that is important to us. And so I decided to work on redefining dyslexia, turning challenges into superpowers. And so it's not only the thing that I talk about during my talent portion. I do a her story, or a monologue, if you'd like to call it that, on dyslexia and my experience, but it's also my community service initiative. So throughout the year, there'll be tons of different events that I'll get to partake in that are bringing awareness, raising money, celebrating dyslexia. And one of those events is actually going to be the Zakem Bridge lighting. So something I'm very excited for. I live right there. So I'm excited to be able to do that event in
Explain
October.
that to folks that are not local.
Absolutely. So the Zakem Bridge is a bridge that runs through Boston. It's pretty big. It's pretty iconic. I would say it's a symbol of Boston by now. And so I live right in Charlestown on the other side of that bridge. And so we're going to be going, and I believe it's with Decoding Dyslexia. They are going to be putting on this event, and also the International Dyslexia Association. So they're partnering to put on this event where they're lighting up the Zakem Bridge in honor of dyslexia for October, which will be very cool.
Any other initiatives that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout the year, I'm going to have a few different events where I'm going to be able to collect books and be donating those. And I do remember being a student at Lindamood-Bell, and there was a huge library and lots of books to choose from. And well, I don't know that I took advantage of that as much as I could have, and read as much as I should have. Now that I really enjoy reading, and I also know how important those books are to children's development, I'm very much interested in collecting books for young children all the way to adults, and being able to donate those.
And what would you say to, thinking back to that, picturing you coming down the stairs from sleeping on it and your decision to come to Lindamood-Bell, what would you say to students who they know they're struggling a little bit and yet kind of hard to take that step to get going?
Yeah, I think the first step is always the scariest. Personally, for me, it's confronting the problem itself. So when I was put with the test scores in front of me, there was no arguing, what the case was. I think I became really good at coping with it while I was in school, and I didn't realize how bad it was. But when it's put out in front of you and you can see it in black and white, it's really hard to ignore that. And I think facing that fear and saying, okay, I do have a problem, but there's a solution for it. And while it may not be a cure, and you will most likely always be dyslexic, and I still to this day, there are little things that I do and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so dyslexic. But confronting that first piece of information and saying, I'm going to commit myself to making this better, it's the greatest gift you can give yourself, because you have no idea how much this one thing can affect the rest of your life in every aspect. And so if you have that opportunity to learn how to overcome it and manage it better and make your life easier, that to me is a no-brainer. And I remember it was a lot. I was in school all day and I gave up my whole summer, but looking back, I can't imagine of making another decision, because coming here and learning the skills that I learned and overcoming what I had overcome has completely changed the course of my life. And I know that I wouldn't be here or doing anything that I'm doing had it not been for Lindamood-Bell.
How can we follow you on your path to Miss America and after?
Absolutely. So I have an Instagram account, Miss America MA. I always encourage everybody to follow that. I post all of my events, all of the appearances I do. Lots of Miss America behind the scenes will be on there. We also have a Facebook. It's just Miss Massachusetts. Feel free to follow that as well. And then if anybody is ever interested in hosting an appearance with me there, they can go to the missmass.org website and book an appearance there.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Great being back here. Good memories.
Good to see you.
And thank you for listening. You can reach us at our website, lindamoodbell.com, or call us at 800-233-1819. You can also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and X. We are Lindamood-Bell.